In North Carolina. It was established in 1709, surveyed in 1713. Robert Turner was the fellow who really developed the town or got things started here. And he was a friend of Henry Somerset, whose title was Duke of Beaufort. That's how we come to be known as Beaufort. Now down in South Carolina, they have a town called Beaufort. They have a pronunciation problem down there. So we don't worry too much about it. It's a nice, pretty little town, though. We have recently been called the coolest small town in America. And as you probably have already noticed, we're kind of along the way, a good stopping point for a lot of these yachts that are coming up and down the intercoastal waterway. We're turning onto Front Street. In the old days, there was not a street here at all, actually just a shell path, and one big reason being there was no seawall over here on the left. So during a high tide, and certainly during a storm, when you had a storm surge in here, it wouldn't be too unusual to get water all the way across what is now Front Street. Now, some of you have been in town for a while, you had a chance to do some things on your own, but if you haven't, here's a couple things you want to do if you have any time at all. One is the Maritime Museum here on the right. It's a state museum. That means there's no admission charge, and there's a wide variety of nautical things in there. So it's really a neat place to visit, including quite a few artifacts. Blackbeard ship. That was called the Queen Anne. Yeah, you didn't know you might have to answer questions, right? By the way, Dick is our driver. He's a driver/marine biologist. And we have, I know, some of his students on here, so we're trying to find out as much about Dick as we can while we have him here. And Larry is our conductor. He's our conductor/telephone expert. So if you have any problems with your telephone service, he can take care of that for you. The Watercraft Center is over here on the left. They're actually in there building wooden boats, and they're using the same methods that they've used for hundreds of years. Now, obviously, it's not the same folks in there, but folks, old methods, probably in a lot of cases, live oak lumber in there. There's a lot of live oak trees in this area. It just so happens that that lumber is well suited for boat building. Now, through the years, some people have said, well, Beaufort's not a real prosperous town. I'll repeat what I said the other day. This bus brings out the best or worst in people. You draw your own conclusions. But people thought Beaufort was not necessarily a real prosperous town. It's the county seat of Carteret County, however. And if you look at a lot of these houses along Front Street, I'm sure the further we go, the more sorry you're going to feel for the people that had to live here. Here's one on the corner that's getting a complete overhaul, and you see from the historic sign here in the front, it's the home of Jacob Henry, who was the first Jewish member of the North Carolina legislature. It's also thought to be a house where Colonel John Easton lived at one point, and he was one of the highest ranking soldiers during the Revolution who lived here in Beaufort. Okay, so now you're beginning to feel kind of sorry for these folks, right? You had sea captains that built here, you had merchants that built here, and large landowners out in the countryside that needed to maintain a townhouse, if you will, because they had a lot of business in Beaufort or business before the court. The Slough House on the right here is a good example of a sea captain's house. You're going to see a lot of plaques. Plaques around buildings are at least 100 years old, and someone has done the research to know who the original builder was and when it was constructed. Now, when we cross over this intersection with Moore Street, the second building from the corner here on the right is really three houses put together. Sarah Davis maintained a boarding house here in the 1880s, and for $1 a day, you could come stay with Sarah, and that included your meals. It also included across the way over here a nice sandy beach. Remember, no seawall over there. A nice bathhouse and a little gazebo. So if you're spending time in Beaufort, spending the night or other time in Beaufort, you're not the first to have thought about doing that, because people have been coming here for hundreds of This is the Duncan House on the right. It just happens to be one of the first buildings that people saw when they came into Beaufort by water. And down there on the first floor on the left-hand side in the corner is where Mr. Duncan maintained a ship store. And there are accounts of him in there sitting at his desk during one of these high water periods with water around his feet. All right, you guys that are with Dick, you of course know what's across Gallant's Channel here. There actually are two marine labs over there. One is a Duke University lab, and the other one is a NOAA lab. It's kind of a sister lab to the one up at Woods Hole in Massachusetts. So that's Pivers Island. And this is one of the tight spots that we come to where we have to get this bus turned around. In that 1713 survey, I'm sure Mr. Turner didn't say to the surveyor, make sure you leave enough room to turn the bus around. Probably never thought of that for whatever reason. And when we get straight down here and back on Front Street, I want you to look off to your right, way over there on the horizon. You see a flag over there? That's Fort Macon. And of course, Fort Macon is one of a series of forts that were built in the early 1800s to protect the coastline. We talk about Fort Macon for a couple of other reasons. One being that they had a young Army captain come here as a consultant about 1840 to give them some advice on some water issues that they had. And that young Army captain was Robert E. Lee, and he actually stayed here in Beaufort during that time. In addition, in the early days of the Civil War, there were a group of about 50 Confederates who went out there and took the fort for the South. And they actually held it for about a year, and then they were met by General Ambrose Burnside, who retook the fort and actually occupied Beaufort here for a couple of years. Now, as you look up Front Street, the view is vastly different than it was prior to 1977. 1977 is important because there was what amounts to an urban renewal effort here. There were a lot of old dilapidated buildings on the water, and some were so far gone that they had to be torn down. Others were restored and painted and made to look nice like you see them today. And that becomes the point in time when tourism seems to really get a shot in the arm. Tourism is kind of what makes the wheels turn here. We'll talk about some other things that people have been involved in through the years as far as their livelihood is concerned. We're going to turn on Orange Street. This is named for William III. William of Orange. That's the same fellow that Williamsburg is named for up in Virginia. And if you look at the house here on the left, at the foundation in particular, you see what looks like a lot of rocks or stones underneath all that paint and whitewash. Some of you probably know or could guess those are ballast stones. They were taken off of ships out here in the old days when they came into port. And when they were brought into town, some people would come and get some of them and use them for a variety of construction projects. So you'll see a number of the older buildings that are sitting on foundations or piers of ballast stones.